From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. I hope some of you got some sleep last night. Election night, obviously, many people stayed up. We do have a new president-elect and a vice president-elect. I will do a special show on Friday, kind of breaking down my Trump versus Harris breakdown, number one. And number two, what we can expect as cybersecurity practitioners over the next 4 years under the second term of President Donald J. Trump. So I'll do a special episode right up about that, so you can kind of have that for the weekend and kind of take a look at that. So without further ado, thank you all for tuning in this morning. Packed show beyond election security, which we're going to talk about. There's a whole lot more stuff going on for cybersecurity practitioners this morning. So without further ado, join me for a CyberHub Podcast morning tradition. My cup of coffee. I've got my double espresso here. Coffee cup. Cheers, y'all. Beautiful. All right, we're starting off with the Wall Street Journal, continuing to lead the way with this hack that China did on the US telecom sector, getting more and more and more information. This article now has multiple different writers associated with it, including Dustin Valls, Aruna Viswantha, Drew Fitzgerald, and Sarah Krause. All at the Wall Street Journal are linking this attack on the US telecom system to Chinese intelligence. They used precision strikes to compromise cell phone lines used by a wide array of senior national security and policy officials across the US government, up into including some politicians, according to people familiar with the matter. Now, a few things about this as I continue this story. One, there's no official announcement from the federal government on this at all. CISA hasn't reported it, DOJ, FBI. No one's come out and admitted this. This is the Wall Street Journal's investigation into this attack. This attack has yet to be confirmed by federal officials. Everyone is speaking on the condition of anonymity because of the national security implications of this data breach and of this, the compromise of some of the most sensitive systems in the US ecosystem as a whole and in critical infrastructure. The access that they had allowed them to scoop up call logs, unencrypted text messages, meaning if you were just sending an iMessage prior to it, audio from potentially thousands of Americans and others with whom they interacted, the emerging pictures helping to reach and confirm the intelligence community's concerns around the national security consequences of this specific attack. Apparently, the Chinese attackers breached Lumen's telecom network. The attackers appear to have the ability to access the phone data virtually of any American who's a customer of one of the compromised carriers, including AT&T and Verizon, that makes up around 95% of the US population, but limited their targets in order probably to avoid detection to several dozen high select value politicians and national security figures, according to people familiar with the investigation. They've also appeared to infiltrate communication providers outside the US, including at least one country that closely shares intelligence with the US, though it isn't clear yet where or how extensive that specific breach is. Investigators don't know yet how China planned to use the information it allegedly stole. Intelligence officials have warned for over a decade that Beijing has amassed an enormous trove of information on Americans in order to identify undercover spies, understand and anticipate decisions by political leaders, and potentially build dossiers for future use. U.S. security officials have said they are concerned that China is applying AI to their stolen data to glean insights. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance said in an interview that apparently the Chinese were spying on his phone based on some stuff that he's heard. Senator Marco Rubio said it's a vulnerability that no one imagined or anticipated. On Face the Nation, Mark Warner, the committee's Democratic chairman, said last week that it was one of the most serious breaches he had ever seen. Lumen Technologies, which is a carrier and government contractor whose network makes up a core piece of the global internet, allegedly had the attackers steal credentials to give themselves access to the management layer of the company's infrastructure. In late summer, that access helped them quietly collect information about how the network routers were configured and perform other reconnaissance for more than a month before they were caught. In the broader attack on the telecom networks, officials believe the attackers also targeted system that carriers use to comply with court-authorized surveillance requests. Lumen doesn't provide wireless service. The attackers didn't steal any customer data or access its wiretap capabilities. Lumen has contracts with the Pentagon and other U.S. agencies, and that's the concern there. The attackers also appears to have used multiple vectors for their attacks on the telecom. They're able to gain some access in part to compromising routers from Cisco and other equipments. All in all, we obviously understand the significance of this specific attack here on the U.S. intelligence and the U.S. political apparatus and our telecom system, and it kind of just gives you an idea of the scope of this. And I think this is going to blow SolarWinds and Equifax out the water. Ideally, this is going to be the type of breach that will collectively really change the way this is going to go. And the new Congress and the new Senate after last night are going to have their hands full with trying to legislate new cybersecurity requirements and responsibilities for organizations around frameworks rather than just breach reporting, right? So we know that there are several bills that are going to probably be brought up early on in the next Congress, including a federal data breach notification and the federal privacy bill. Both of those have bipartisan support. They'll likely make it through once the new Congress and Senate are sworn in and the new president is sworn in on January 20th of 2025. But this one specifically will require further investigation and likely a deeper dive into the root cause of how China is able to just completely infiltrate these systems. So there's that there. We'll continue to monitor this story. And again, I think this story is going to be huge when it breaks. Huge. Right now, no one's picking up on it. I haven't seen one cybersecurity publication talk about it yet. But the Wall Street Journal is covering it extensively, and it's worthy of our attention. Schneider Electric is now confirming the breach that were reported on yesterday did actually take place. They're confirming that their developer platform was breached after a threat actor claimed to steal 40 gigabytes of data. Schneider Electric is investigating a cybersecurity incident involving unauthorized access to one of the internal project execution tracking platforms, which is hosted within an isolated environment. Schneider, a French multinational, this is their third breach, by the way, in 18 months. So they're averaging about one every 6 months. That's not very good for a company that's in critical infrastructure. And you can imagine that there will likely be people looking at their security controls after this specific breach. In Washington State, the Washington State Administrative Office of the Courts experienced a cyber attack that's leading to an outage. According to a Pierce County statement, the outage started on Sunday. It's affecting court operations across the entire state. Both the district and superior court were impacted. The outage has limited some services through, though essential functions, and most proceedings are expected to continue with minimal interruptions. They've announced that the outage is due to a data breach. However, at this time, they're not giving out any more information, and I couldn't find anywhere on any of the leak sites on the dark web anyone taking responsibility for this one. Rural hospitals in Bainbridge, Georgia, can no longer access their electronic health systems after a ransomware attack on the hospital. According to medical and surgical hospital service providers, its operations were not impacted by the attack. However, the hospital staff implemented downtime procedures and they reverted to pen and paper to record patient information. By the way, that's so much easier to do in rural places because their computer systems are fairly new, but everyone there has been there for like 20 years, right? Like people that are in healthcare in rural areas have been there forever. They know their patients. When someone walks in, they know who it is. They don't even need to ask them their history because they know their history. So reverting to pen and paper, actually, they're far more resilient than, let's say, an urban area hospital. Like in Atlanta, if Grady or Northside went down, I think that would have farther, it would be much more dangerous than this specific attack here. JamesCesar.substack.com is where you can find all the latest and greatest. So make sure to go and subscribe there. It's absolutely free. At the end of the show, we always put up a written format of the show with takeaway items, with a paragraph about every single story we covered here, kind of summarizing it for you. It's really easy to share, very easy to digest. Please make sure to go subscribe there as well. Microchip Technology, which experienced the data breach in August, are now reporting in their quarterly reports that the expenses from said incident have now reached $21.4 million. The Plate ransomware group was behind the attack on microchip technology, and they claim to have stolen gigabytes worth of data. The hacker made 4 gigabytes available containing microchip data. They claimed the leaked data includes personal data, client documents, and files related to budget, payroll, accounting, contracts, taxes, and finances. By early September, the company restored its operation, and Microchip confirmed that the threat actor has taken some information from its system, including employee contact information and password hashes. So as of right now, they're saying this is going to cost them around it's cost them already $21.4 million. Chances are that's probably going to end up in the $30 million range for them. And that just tells you the cost of a cyber attack. That also lets you understand how important it is to have good cyber insurance coverage and to make sure it covers all of that. So you shouldn't have just one policy, but you should have multiple rolling policy, maybe 10, maybe 2 or 3 $10 million policies. And based on the size of your organization, you definitely want to evaluate that risk. And you also want to understand your umbrella coverage and then your business interruption coverage, right? So understanding all three is really important. And then having enough for all three, meaning if I know I'm going to be out for 3 weeks, just as an example, because my backup and recovery and recovery and restore operation is going to take 3 weeks. You want to have 3 weeks worth of business interruption coverage. You want to sit with your CFO, with your accounting teams. You want to really kind of look at those numbers, add those up, understand those, and so much more. So that's going to be really, really significant here when you're looking at cyber insurance. And there's that. Remember when Snowflake customers were abused, and then everyone blamed Snowflake for the breach, but Snowflake really wasn't to blame for the breach. It was just people didn't have MFA and their username and passwords were essentially compromised. Well, apparently the attacker behind that specific attack is a Canadian by the name of Alexander Connor Mushka, aka WIFO, aka Judici. He's Canadian, and the Canada Department of Justice arrested him on Wednesday at the request of the U.S., and he's scheduled to appear in court again today, apparently, in order to be extradited to the U.S. Sorry, he was arrested Wednesday of last week. He appeared in court later that afternoon. The case was adjourned to yesterday, as extradition requests are considered confidential state-to-state communication. There's no more comment, but apparently he was the person behind the attack on so many different organizations. Snowflake obviously has 9,400 customers, 165 were compromised as part of this breach. Snowflake took some heat for it for not allowing MFA. And Ernesto here is guessing that, let me guess, the password was password. Potentially in this case. But no, identity is the new perimeter. If you haven't kind of like let that sink in, understand that people are no longer kind of just phishing for the sake of downloading malware. They realize that doesn't work. So what they're doing is they're phishing people. They're getting credentials. Once they get those credentials, they sit on those credentials, and then at some point they abuse them. And we saw that with several different attacks, by the way, from China, where China was doing password spraying attacks, but they were doing one attempt a day. So if they had like 10 different passwords for a user, they were trying one password a day until it worked, in order not to trigger any sort of rules around password spraying attacks, because you wouldn't do it for one password a day. Sometimes people have fat fingers and they misspell their password, but you'd probably set it up if there were 5 consecutive attempts, right? So they're doing it once. Again, patience is big there. So that's the story here with this one. So we'll see. This person is being brought to justice, and that's good for them as well. In other good guys prevail, Interpol announced it arrested 41 individuals and taken down over 1,000 servers and infrastructures running 22,000 IP addresses that facilitate cybercrime in an international law enforcement action titled Operation Synergy 2. The operation took place between April and August of this year. It spanned 95 countries, resulted in 41 arrests for various crimes, including ransomware, phishing, and information stealers. Location-based highlights: Hong Kong, Mongolia, Macau, Madagascar, and Estonia all had massive parts of the infrastructure, and all were taken down. The top U.S. cyber officials, as of this morning and last night, Jen Easterly on X tweeted that this election went off without a hitch. They've seen no evidence of any malicious activities impacting the security or integrity of the election. Not to say that here in Georgia, where I live, actually, There were bomb threats called into several locations here. I can tell you our people are resilient. Everyone stayed in line, kind of people evacuated, then went back and continued their democratic votes in the election yesterday. Overall, based on multiple officials I spoke with, I mean, I was up till like 3:30, 4 a.m. tomorrow, just yesterday. Sorry, talking to people. People I've spoken with at CISO, at FBI have all kind of said, this went off without a hitch. That's the playbook. They think they found the playbook for election security. Not to say that there weren't issues, but the issues that came out were obviously addressed by those respective counties and done so in a way. So all in all, a job well done by CISA and then the counties there as well. Again, the way they were trying to influence the election was calling in bomb threats to precincts. That obviously was there. As far as misinformation and disinformation, that's a debate for a different day. All in all, yesterday went off without a hitch. We now have a new president-elect and a vice president-elect, and obviously a new Senate and a Congress will be coming in here in the next 30 to 45 days. So we'll see what that means for us as practitioners. We'll be speaking to many people over the next few days. I'll try to get you an episode Friday. If not, I'll have something written down of what we can expect from Congress, Senate, and their agenda here for your Saturday morning read, only available on our Substack. So without further ado, thank you all for being part of the show today. Really appreciate everyone tuning in on YouTube, X, Facebook, LinkedIn, and everywhere else. Thank you all for your comments. Please make sure to subscribe, follow, and remember that we are one nation. It doesn't matter win or lose. At this time, we come together and we proceed because our adversaries are seeking our destruction, and we ought to come together, irregardless to what happened yesterday, in order to beat our adversaries and continue the greatest democracy in the history of the world. Until then, great rest of your day, y'all, and stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.